Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools, and much more.
When we met a few days ago to talk about this discussion, you mentioned also you're doing some work in modern slavery.
Yeah, so a few years ago, we introduced the first product level modern slavery declaration, which just works with the exact supply chains for a specific product or range of products. And it's based on a modern slavery risk assessment, but also it does a data quality risk assessment. So there's two metrics in the assessment across the 8 different categories that are in both the UK and Australian and likely shortly New Zealand and Canada. Very, very similar legislation, same heads of consideration. And so at a product level, what we're seeking to do is to bridge the data mismatch when you have, one of the companies that's captured by the 50 million pounds or 100 million Australian dollar thresholds. And, they say to us, say, a plasterboard manufacturer, Mr. Plasterboard manufacturer, please tell me about the modern slavery issues in the plasterboard supply chain that I buy from you. And the manufacturer then sends them back their company statement that covers 150 products that they manufacture because that's all they've got.
Yeah.
So with a product level declaration, we have the ability for a manufacturer to take that and actually answer the question directly, which then can be aggregated by the contractors up into a proper statement. And ultimately, a modern slavery declaration is part of the major positive declaration process that we're doing. So again, we are able to do a benchmark statement for a manufacturer based on the information we already have. It might not have great data quality because a lot of it might be research based, but as you know, in the legislation, there has to be an annual report and an annual improvement. And so working on data quality improvement over time gives a manufacturer a pathway to move forward on improving the quality of their outcomes.
So this is interesting because I get clients frequently saying, what do I need to do to make sure there is no slavery in my product supply chain? And of course, that's virtually impossible. So what you're saying your product does is it's helping to demonstrate that those manufacturers are moving in the right direction. It's not an assurance of no slavery, because I'm not sure anybody will ever achieve that.
No, it's not, and it's a framework that enables a manufacturer to provide an answer to a builder or a contractor who's buying their product, and gives them then a pathway to what they need to do to improve their outcomes on an annual basis. And obviously, if someone wants to take it seriously, then they can engage us or other consultants. We don't really care. They can provide data from anywhere. Ultimately, this is about documenting in a way that can be transferred and be aggregated by someone who's actually trying to do a good job of reporting their modern slavery risk.
Brilliant, thank you. And also, when we first met, we kept discovering that we have common backgrounds and common interests, and we talked briefly about the Supply Chain Sustainability School. And I started the school in the UK, and I believe that you were very early adopters in Australia. Would you like to talk to me about that?
Yeah, I mean, the supply chain, I think we met in the UK and then we met again in Sydney some years later. But and I think it was a result of your initial meeting, initial meeting in the UK, that I actually sought out the Sustainability Supply Chain School in Australia. And yeah, I mean, it's an important initiative. I mean, education and understanding is an essential part of moving the industry on. And if education and the cost of education becomes a barrier to learning, then it's a barrier to sustainability. Yeah. And we were partners of the school for quite a long while, and just looking to get re-involved with it again.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I've found in the UK that, we're talking about some of the very sophisticated things that you do in global green tag, but when you get down into small business area, which the construction industry, I find generally in most parts of the world that I've looked at, is a very small number of very large businesses at the top and a very large number of very small businesses at the bottom, and the depth of ignorance, for want of a better word, is quite astonishing. I mean, we launched a free carbon calculator in the UK. We've got something like 2,000 businesses now signed up to it, mostly small businesses that are just recording their carbon in a very simple way. But we would get calls to say, well, the system's asking me about electricity consumption. Where do I find that information? And it's like, well, you look at your electric bill, it's not that difficult, but there seems to be a real lack of awareness of the impact at that level, at the small business level, and it's not the fault of small businesses, as you say. It's lack of availability of high quality learning that doesn't have to cost a lot of money, which is obviously what we're trying to do in school in the UK and in Australia, and we're just in the process of launching a school in Ireland in the new year as well. So it's growing slowly, but very important that we provide those education resources free of charge. So we can talk about this forever, I'm sure. But yeah, I think it's been interesting, and the journey in Australia is. I think we've had the school there for about 8 years, something like that now, and it's been quite a success.
Yes, it has. And, I mean, ultimately, I spend probably 95 or maybe even 98% of my time when I'm talking to, prospective clients, just educating,
Yeah.
because it's as soon as you educate and they're aware of what the scope and potential is for their products and for their business, and all about the sort of different global rating tools and how all that's working, and how one piece of evidence like a product health declaration can carry them around and make them relevant to 170 plus countries through LEED, or 90 plus countries through the International Well Building Standard, or 54 countries through the Green Star Standard. And that one piece of evidence is, probably costs them less than half a page or a one-page ad in the local magazine. The objections about how costly and hard certification is to get becomes a bit moot. Often, that's put up as a barrier, but in reality, it generally means that somebody's made some assumptions and hasn't really ever asked the question, or not asked of the correct person or organizations.
Yeah, I'd generally say it's not a cost, it's an investment, particularly as the world is taking more and more interest in some of these things. Is there, I mean, you've mentioned LEED, Green Star, BREEAM, and all of those things. Is there enough standardization around the world? Because large manufacturers tend to be very global, and supply chains have a global reach. Is there enough standardization? Do we need more, or do we need to not worry too much about that and just get on with it?
No, look, I think there's a few different areas. I mean, when we set up Global Green Tag, we set it up called Global Green Tag for one
For a
good
reason.
reason, because we called up European standards or European norms, and we called up American norms, and had them in the one clause as acceptable. And so when we got recognized, we were the joining force, in a sense, between the two hemispheres from a standards point of view. But ultimately, the world has standardized from an EPD point of view on EN 15804. So that's consistent in LEED and Green Star and in BREEAM. And so from an EPD, from an life cycle analysis and product declaration point of view, there is complete standardization globally around that. So that's really good. There's relatively good globalization around sort of volatile organic compounds. Where the lack of standardization comes into play is around what constitutes a responsible product and how that is verified or validated. I think if I'm looking at all of the different rating systems around the world that I can see, I think the one, and this is without even a hint of any local bias, because it's the one probably that's done the most recent updates, is Green Star and its responsible products framework. It really is strides ahead of anything else globally, and even from what I'm seeing, Lead V5 is not really doing the whole product sector the kind of justice that it needs to be done in terms of anteing up to a more robust procurement, sustainable procurement sector. It's focusing on climate. So there's a whole piece to be done then to be executed on around sustainable procurement or responsible product procurement. When it comes to BREEAM, there's some very, very small technical aspects that are probably would get over the hump of that standardization. It's a little bit frustrating from that point of view, but we're in dialogue with them at the moment, trying to overcome those little technical glitches. But ultimately, there is there's a general recognition that sort of third-party certification, the Type 1 eco labels under ISO 14024, that is the premier sort of indicator. And of course, all of our systems, all the systems that we operate, under an externally verified, compliant ISO 14024 system, and along with an ISO 17065 compliant conformance assessment process that we operate. So, we're technically one of the most externally certified and verified eco labels on the planet. And that's how we like it. We want to be, because when we first started Eco Specifier, people would say to us, "Yeah, but who checks the checkers?"
Yeah, yeah. You can go on that thread forever, can't you?
That was like, okay, that's a really important thing. So we've always focused on that. So being able to demonstrate that we subject ourselves to that external review. Everything we do, the product health declarations we do, they're externally peer reviewed by a consultant toxicologist. Everything we do is internally peer reviewed by another team member before it goes out. Obviously, EPDs and LCA is always peer reviewed. So there's this very, very high level of an importance placed on making sure that we can say that what we do is above reproach. And I think that's held us in very good stead.
Yeah, it's really important for purchasers because my background is procurement, and it's a very scary world for buyers these days. They're getting into things that they don't necessarily understand, and I do get questions like, what is there a database of sustainable products? And I can just pick one. It's not quite as simple as that, is it? I mean, there's lots of information out there, but you really do need to start to understand it.
Well, what we see it as our job is to help manufacturers once they're certified to get that out. So we have other websites are able to connect to an API to our website and just on a daily basis to get uploads of certified product. And of course, the products that we certify they might be available in Australia or the US or the UK or Europe because they're global manufacturers. We've got over 18,000 SKUs. Manufactured in 22 countries for over 250 manufacturers globally. So, on our books, and so we the products that we certify are in the global supply chains.
Yeah. Yeah, and in many cases, this information is available free of charge, isn't it? When we talk,
Absolutely.
when we met earlier about building transparency in the States, and I think they pick up some of your EPD data, and as a not-for-profit, they provide that information for free.
Yeah, and we're indeed. I mean, you don't even have to. There's not even a mandatory login on our website. You can just sort of rock up and use the information to your heart's content. Anything that's on that website is available. If you want a copy of our standard, you have to sign a bit of a license agreement, but it's all free. Ultimately, the whole process is about openness. It's about transparency, and that's an essential part of what we do. Is that free access to the information.
Fantastic. I guess we ought to try and wrap now. I could talk about some of this stuff forever. But yeah, thanks very much for that, David. I think our audience, as I said when we first met, or no, actually not when we first met, but when we met last week, it is, you know, primarily procurers, sustainability people that are really trying to understand how they can start to develop their procurement processes to deliver more sustainable outcomes. And I think what you guys are doing and what we've learned from today's podcast, I hope is going to be really useful to them. So thanks very much for your time. I do hope our audience benefit from our discussion.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. I mean, ultimately, what we do is we make something which is really complex, like sustainability, and make it, turn it into collateral that people can use to
Make it
market those
understandable for
claims,
people. Yeah.
in a trustworthy way. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.